I've recently found myself living back in my hometown after 15 years of living away. When I left this place, I had mammoth dreams, almost to become someone entirely unrecognizable from who I was when I lived here. I visited multiple times since leaving, but in those visits, I've never really had time to really look at how far I've come, and also look at how far my hometown has come. I have seen so much more of the world and met so many different types of people, and from those experiences and those travels, each step I've created almost a new and improved version of myself. And it's a bit strange to be back because it feels uncomfortable. I don't know if it's a coincidence that recently my social media algorithms have been feeding me with nostalgia content. Old TV adverts, music, video games, anything you can imagine. I've recently gotten an Instagram reel delivered right to my homepage to make me feel nostalgic. This little camera here is a Samsung PL55, and it was one of the first cameras I ever used to create YouTube content. This little device gave me the opportunity to make a living from doing something I love, YouTube. A whopping 12 megapixels and only films in 480p, but at 30 frames per second. With 5 times optical zoom, it even records audio on its video format. To be fair, I am actually quite surprised that it can even focus at this range. It's pretty impressive. I bought this camera refurbished in around 2009 for £60. And today, in the spirit of nostalgia, I'm going to use it. So come with me for a walk down my memory lane. The first stop in this memoria is a place called Falmer Pond. Falmer Pond is a really small area just outside of Brighton, and it belongs to the ancient village of Falmer. Here you'll see an old church which overlooks a secluded pond. And this little pond is home to a variety of wildlife and entirely surrounded by farmland. My neighbour growing up used to have a small pond in their back garden, and every year the same frog would come and lay a ton of frog spawn. Our neighbour would then gift it to our family, and my mum and I would raise them from their little gloop pods to tadpoles to mini frogs, and then we would bring them here and release them into a little covered corner of this pond. My mum spent a lot of time when I was young trying to instill in me a sense of animal well-being and also responsibility. And I think that's honestly part of the reason why I care a lot about nature now. I think it's been about 28 years since I've been back to this place, and apart from the little beach here being a lot smaller than I remember, this place has stayed exactly the same. Ah, did you not find that nostalgic enough? Well. This next destination is my childhood home. This was my parents' second house, and they bought it in the mid-1970s, which was about 10 years after it was first built. Overlooking the Brighton Valley, on a good clear day, you could see the sea right in the distance from the living room window. I started my YouTube journey in this house, a concept so beguiling and unusual to the masses that a Brighton newspaper ran a page 3 article on me. They also called me a transvestite, but that's neither here nor there. My dad moved away from this house in 2017, after 40 years to downsize. And this is my first time back since before then. There's something so ominous and strange about seeing a place that has so many memories to you, but you can't revisit. The entire area has fallen into disrepair, a far cry from the many families that lived on this street and took pride in their family homes. The street sign is unreadable from decay, and these former homes are now rented for profit. The gardens are no longer tended, and the verges are no longer cut. The house that I grew up in until 21 years old still has the same gold house numbers that my mum picked out when I was a baby. The outside of the house hasn't really changed very much. It still has the grey shingles and the exact same metal gate that my dad put there when I was young, although now they hang off on one hinge. If that isn't a sign of the times, I don't know what is. But honestly, now coming back to this place, it does not feel like my home. Well, let's bump up the mood a little bit, shall we? The weather has taken a little bit of a turn for the worse here, so with a slight outfit change, we are now at the Wild Park. This is a place that I hold very dear to my heart because this is where we always used to bring my 2 childhood dogs with us, and they would run and leap like there was no tomorrow. I have a very strong memory of playing cricket here with my dad and my cousin when I was very, very, very young. And there was a little bit of family drama with that cousin because there was a little bit of a question about whose daughter she was. For me as a child, that didn't matter, but some of the adults that were around at that time were very peculiar and would quite often be kind of mean to her, even though to me she was just my cousin. The Wild Park is a large recreation area in Brighton, and in summer in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was the place to be on the weekend. We would spend days down here as a family with our little dogs, and I think we used to come to this place quite a lot because it was so vast but also flat, which meant it was so much more wheelchair accessible for my mum. That is something the 90s was not known for. The back of the park goes right up onto a big hill and offers huge views over residential Brighton, and honestly, not a lot has changed. The only thing that has changed here in this park is this little building. When I was young, it was a community centre and cafe offering ice cream and coffee and food to visitors of the park. But interestingly enough, now it is a dojo for my old karate teacher, who's also the guy who won There's Something About Miriam. Isn't life bizarre? Roll up, girly wigs, ding ding ding, you've won a nothing included trip to Brighton Pier. Brighton's very own bijou theme park suspended right above the sea. Known by many different names since it was opened in 1899 to replace the chain pier that was destroyed in a storm 3 years before. Brighton Palace Pier is the destination for fun theme park rides and game arcades, and I have spent many days here, all the way up until I left Brighton for London in 2010. The pier has a very strong Victorian decor, which has absolutely not changed since I was a child. The arcades are still just as bright and enticing, and the rides still look just as rickety. Brighton Palace Pier is technically the 3rd pier that Brighton had built. The first was the chain link pier that I've already mentioned. The second was the West Pier that has been repeatedly destroyed by fire, arson, strong winds, and even has a little bit of controversy around it. This is where my love for DDR and arcade dance machines started, and that's something I'm still doing to this day. I'm also particularly fond of the 2p machines in the arcades here, although now these have mostly been replaced by 10p machines, which in the 90s you would only play if you were some crazy upper-class rich person. Imagine 10p in the 90s! It's at least £96 now. The walkway on the pier has gaps where you can look right down into the sea, and it looks like a long way. And as a child, I had a fear of water and simply could not step on those gaps, else a meltdown would ensue. Although if I remember correctly, just nearby the side of the pier on the beach itself is where I first kissed a boy in my early teens. Nowadays, I visit the pier to try and win Little Biscuit Boy various cuddly toys and hold hands with my boyfriend to avoid monstrous seagulls that'll snatch your chips right out of your hands if you're not careful. Ladies and gentlemen, and those of you in between, please keep your limbs inside the car as our next destination is Brighton Marina. A village built in the 1970s by various wealthy London gangsters, the marina was constructed by building huge sea walls and removing all of the water to create Brighton's very own mini Venice experience, is what I would be saying if it did in fact look anything like Venice. Filled with hardly anyone at all, Brighton Marina has very fond memories for me, particularly of the Asda Superstore, in which I would pester my mother to go to for sweeties during my childhood. Despite the number of restaurants and ocean view apartments here, it is quite a sleepy village, and its main features are a cinema, a McDonald's, and a car boot sale on select Sundays every summer. My mum definitely had the car boot sale bug, always purchasing another piece of ornamental Wedgwood or the like for the dining room cabinet or another dog-shaped filigree to put directly in front of the TV. There is something odd about the marina that remains untouched by time. It's always eerily quiet here, but filled with iconic lighting that instantly takes me back to autumn nights as a child, coming to Asda. When I was that young child, I thought when I grew up I wanted to own one of these little yellow duplexes in the harbour. They're almost like little self-contained two-storey apartments. I couldn't tell you why I wanted that because I also hated water. But now as an adult overlooking this same harbour, I realise just how little this place is in comparison to my memory. And this tunnel used to really scare me as a child. It had no lighting and was very darkly painted. I used to try and hold my breath and run through it as fast as I could, or else the sea goblins would get me. Turns out the marina owners must have also felt the same, as now it is a well-lit and bright corridor linking directly to the car park. And here I am, with my dad, having safely avoided the sea goblins. There's actually something quite perplexing about memory lane. I feel like looking to the future is really important, but so is knowing the road that you've travelled. I'm about to leave the United Kingdom and move my entire life thousands of miles away for the next chapter. And I'm very fortunate to be able to be bringing my boyfriend and my dog with me on this new adventure. There's a few reasons why I'm leaving, and when the time comes, I will share more about my experience on this channel. If anything, this little project has made me come to accept that the embers of nostalgia are warm and inviting, but if I hold on to them for too long, I'm gonna get hurt. Life is for the living, and here's to the next adventure.